Hello, listeners. Welcome to IT Guy Who Lives podcast. I'm your host, Palash Gupta, Diploma in Nutrition and Fitness Sciences from INFS India, and Bachelor's in Sports and Exercise Science from Loughborough University, UK. The goal of this podcast is to understand the science and science based tools with the help of industry experts so that we can further optimize our training and nutrition goals. With that in mind, let's jump right in. So, hello, listeners. Today, yet again, we have been graced by the presence of Almighty Captain America of evidence based community who has risen from the depths of frozen tomb in order to defeat the Sauron residing at the top of the Black Ivory Tower, owned by this shady organization known as Renaissance Periodization. So, all jokes apart, in all seriousness, Eric, I literally love that album art and the cover art of your London seminar, which you guys did in collaboration with Revive Stronger, that all, uh, where you and Alberto at one side and Jared and Mike at other side, full on Captain America Civil War theme. State of the art, one of the finest craftsmanship. Shout out to Steve Hall from the Revive Stronger.
Yeah, they did really well
So,
with that.
yeah. So with
It's
that in mind,
unfortunate we didn't get to have that conference because of COVID,
yeah,
but
because of
that,
the corona happened, right? At the time,
yeah.
same time. Yeah,
But
in
honestly, I think
2020.
the art, like the picture, is probably better than the conference ever would have been.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
indeed, indeed. So with that in mind, Eric, I have a disclaimer to put out, which I didn't in the previous meeting. And that disclaimer says that on this podcast, we actually request and urge our guests to provide the longest possible introduction about themselves, right? Whether it's in the terms of their professional endeavors, their training endeavors, or the
Mhm.
story behind how this iron bug bit them and made them the person they are. Because we want to know all the events which unfolded and laid down the bricks in front of our guests so that they can walk that path and become the person that they are today. So
Got
with
it.
that in mind, I'm handing the mic over to you, Eric, so that you can give the longest possible introduction you have ever given anywhere, alone on your resume. So over to you, Eric.
So I was born in 1983 in Children's Hospital, Oakland, which is on the border of Oakland and Berkeley. For those who aren't familiar with the Bay Area geography, the greater San Francisco metropolitan area, right across the bay, is Oakland, which is the second largest city in the Bay Area. That's where I was born. On that was on the border with Berkeley, which is actually a relatively small city, but it's well known for UC Berkeley. Great place to study. Generally, a relatively politically active area. And Oakland was also, I think, home of the birthplace of the Black Panthers in the 70s. So maybe we could start. Maybe I should start in the 70s actually now. Although
Yeah.
you'll find that I, just by looking at me, probably had very little to do with the Black Panthers as a white guy born after their formation. But that's just the context to know, where I was born. Um, okay, in all seriousness, though, yeah, I think the big thing is I just honestly in my personal life being able to build self-efficacy, which I think we're going to talk about a good bit when we talk about adherence. Um, it was a game changer for me to get bit by the iron bug because it gave me something where I was able to put forth effort, get rewarded for it, and built a sense of self-confidence and belief that, hey, I could be good at something that maybe I didn't think I traditionally was. Like I wasn't like a jock or anything like that in high school. Um, and I would say even more so studying exercise science and nutrition and being reasonably good at that also further pushed me to continue my education. There was multiple time points where I didn't know if I would go get my CSCS or get my master's or continue on to a PhD, or if I had the capability or the intelligence to contribute research or do my stats, things like that. And it all started with just going, you know what, Eric, like let's just stick with this weightlifting thing and see where you are after a couple of years. That built enough confidence in me to go, you know what, like I really love this. So the passion that I had for it led to greater adherence, which built self-efficacy, which then led me towards being interested in studying it and seeing for the first time, maybe I'm actually a little smarter than I thought I was, and kind of being this feed forward mechanism. And then, today I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe that led to me now having started my own businesses that are serving a role of service to the community, and that I'm, reasonably successful academic coach and semi mediocre athlete. But nonetheless, um, yeah, I think my little personal story is one that will probably connect quite nicely to what we're going to talk about today, Palash.
Beautiful, beautiful. So
Is that long enough?
maybe a short one, because the last time you did a pretty long one, and listeners really liked one. But we can take it.
We
Obviously,
can
it is
you
always
just listen to both the beginnings of this one and
yeah,
the
yeah,
last
yeah.
one,
Sure,
like
sure.
back to
I,
back.
I will edit it and combine those two of them. So in the both of
Perfect.
the episodes, so that will work fine, definitely.
And they can play it on 0.75 speed, just so it sounds like I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah.
really slow talking
Okay.
and very emphatic.
Really
Yeah,
putting the thought and effort up
that's
behind it,
right. Yeah.
definitely. So before we dive into the today's agenda, as we talked about last time, that we practice and preach the evidence-based thinking. So you have been author, and you are the creator of the mass. And people who do not know what mass is, it's a monthly application in instant sport. It's a research review, and one of the finest I have seen. Especially the way you people have categorize the outline, make it simple for a layman person to actually identify what it is, what the study was about, and what are the inferences that they can. So it has been like 4 to 5 years. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, that you have started. How many years? 6 years, basically.
Yeah, we started in 2017. So we are coming up on 4.5 years. Actually,
Correct.
right now it's 4.5 years in October, because we
Correct.
started in, I think our first issue was April of 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I just had one curiosity. For the last 4.5 years, you have published a lot of mass research reviews. Do you have any kind of on the top of your mind some really really interesting studies which completely refuted your beliefs, that you thought these things are have to be done in this way, but they turned out completely upside down? So just a synopsis of all those things.
Yeah. That's a really cool aspect of mass is, when you kind of commit your, and actually just to being research based, kind of like we talked about in our last episode, is that once you commit yourself to being open to updating your beliefs based on the data given to you, the things that you consider fundamental knowledge becomes narrower, you
Yeah,
know, like, geez, man, if you'd asked me in 2008 or 2007 or 2006 or 5, I would have probably said something like, like you have to do sets of 5 to get stronger, you know, and like now that is not something that I would have as a must statement.
yeah,
Um, Progressive overload might be something that I won't fundamentally turn over, or energy balance. But everything else exists on a spectrum. So I would say nothing has fundamentally turned my world upside down, or changed my beliefs drastically. But there are a ton of things that I have definitely updated. So one recent thing that I just wrote about and just came out. Geez, it's the third for us. I want to say just 2 days ago. You can
yeah.
read up.
I read it. Yeah, I read it.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been saying for years, like, we have this data on muscle protein synthesis,
Yep.
that if you look at elderly individuals for the same dose of protein, they have lower MPS rates. So therefore, older individuals develop anabolic resistance, and therefore they should eat more protein. But really great paper that looked at multiple different lines of research, good narrative review that came out looking specifically at masters athletes, and made a very strong case for, hey, actually, if you've been resistance training for most of your life, and you're in your, the masters athlete range is generally 35 to 60, there's no reason to expect, and all the data actually goes against the idea that you have fundamentally different, protein metabolism, because you've
Wonderful. Yeah.
maintained that kind of quote unquote young muscle. And I think if I had a 60-year-old lifter who'd been training most of his life come to me and say, "Hey, Eric, I want to optimize nutrition," just say 6 months ago, I probably would have said, maybe we bump it up a little bit. But I don't necessarily think that is necessary. I don't necessarily think that's necessary for someone who's been lifting and is still healthy and is doing all the things that they were doing, let's say 1, 2, 3, or 4 decades prior. So that's one that just popped up on the top of my head that just recently came out.
So how does it change for those who have not been resistance training? So will there, because
Great question. Yeah, so the data still, it existed that led us
yeah,
to this idea of anabolic resistance. And the way that data came about was they sampled untrained in a number of studies, untrained individuals, let's say in their 20s and 30s, and then compared them to untrained individuals over 65, and gave them a protein bolus after a workout, and noticed that MPS rates were not as high for the same dose, and that you had to take in more to get a
oh,
similar MPS response when you were older. So there is a true effect of age, don't get me wrong. However, probably a better way to describe it is not that age gives you anabolic resistance, it's that resistance training seems to preserve your normal response to protein, and even just activity. So one of these lines of research, which is quite interesting, is that this is a observable phenomenon when you look at the Western world, but when you look at that is largely sedentary, but the effect diminishes and sometimes is non-significant when you look at different populations. So for example, the Dutch are one of the most active populations on the planet, and individuals between the age bracket of 61 to 70, they report on average 2 hours per day of cycling and walking. So they're not necessarily even lifting. And their response to their muscle protein synthesis response to protein is much less blunted compared to, say, Canadian older men who, like us Americans, are far less active on average when you look at those averages in the country. So it is really more this effect of cumulative years of sedentariness or inactivity rather than it is just the biological age of the individual. And when you start to look at some of the underpinning mechanisms by why might this occur, some of the ones that are the most well established and have at least been shown to correlate with and potentially cause quote unquote anabolic resistance is poor vasodilation and capillary density, specifically of muscle fibers. And you see selective type 2 fiber atrophy during sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle mass. However, when you look at trained older adults who've gone through, and when I say trained, I don't mean 30 years, even like studies where they've been training for 6 months or a year, you don't see that same effect. The age-matched controls who are trained versus untrained, both in middle-aged and older individuals, they have better blood flow delivery, and that seems to be associated with higher anabolic signaling. So mTOR is higher.
yeah,
So in addition to that, we've heard many people talk about inflammation. There's some interesting lines of research where you'll see ibuprofen, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, or other
and
NSAIDs. They will, if taken in high regular dosages, so I don't want to be a fearmonger here, they can blunt
blood.
hypertrophy in younger individuals, but the same dosage in older individuals actually seems to aid hypertrophy. The idea here is that the baseline inflammation when you get older and older and older is higher, and
Right.
this kind of higher inflammation status in older, inactive, untrained individuals may also serve to blunt hypertrophy, and that's why bringing it down is theoretically thought to, in those studies I was just referencing, result in better response to resistance training. However, again, when you look at age-matched, controlled, trained versus untrained middle-aged men, I think I'm specifically thinking of a study where they compared folks right around the age of 50, you see lower levels of inflammation in those who are resistance training. So the two main mechanisms by which we think anabolic resistance, or that we're most confident that anabolic resistance occurs by, are either completely absent or greatly diminished in individuals who have been training, again even just for a year. So
Yeah.
it's really never too late to start. Unless you've only got a year left to live, then maybe just go on a beach and have a margarita. but but yeah, so if you're 50 or you're 60 and you're thinking, oh man, Eric, I've been lifting since I was 20, 30, or even 40, just start now, because you're going to be in a much better
Much.
vehicle for the rest of your life from this point on, for sure.
Yeah, because on the flip side of the sign, there are some changes in your digestion as well. We have seen that leucine absorption goes down, your gut changes over the time period, your gut health, and if you're not taking about care about your digestion and all, these things can definitely make a lot of significant changes. On food side, yes, you are trying to consume 40 grams, but how much is getting actually digested in your gut if you are having a healthy digestion, or like you see absorption goes down by that. So we have to take care about those things.
Yeah, and
Really,
there's
really good
definitely links in
points.
the research related to being
Yeah,
sedentary
shouldn't.
and GI health. So
Yeah.
it's all I'm not going to say there is no effective age that if you if you stay active you won't
Father
die.
time, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Father time will catch up to you,
yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. The bad news is, guess what? You're gonna die, and you won't be in good health at that point. There's no way around it.
We are
Um,
not that fortunate as you that you can live on forever, or as a godfather, like he has been alive since the inception of the earth, right? 3DMJ godfather.
that's right.
So
That's
that's a
right.
great thing.
You just need to
That's a
find
great thing.
something to encase you in ice and then come back 50 years
Yeah.
later. Yeah,
Or the fountain of youth. You have
that's
to
right.
search for Asal Gul
You
in
got to
that
get I like that. We got a Marvel DC, and that was actually the
crossover.
Lord of the Rings crossover that you had
Yeah.
earlier. That was good. Yeah.
Exactly. So really, really good points that you have mentioned. It will help a lot of people, especially those who are getting older. It's never too late to start. You just have to start.
Yeah, and
So with
even if
that,
you yourself are in your 20s or 30s, like, I mean,
yeah,
you've got parents, you've got grandparents, you've got friends,
yeah,
you've got an
exactly.
uncle. And, sometimes, a lot of the times in my experience, when I speak to even people my age, my contemporaries, because I'm approaching 40, one of the potential barriers is, God, like I have to learn a new skill. I have to do this new thing. Like I've got a career, I've got kids, I'm busy. And it feels like it is too late. And that sometimes is not necessarily a rational thought, but it is a thought nonetheless. And if they know that it's actually on paper not too late, you can get many of these same benefits, and they accumulate quite quick. That's just one less potential barrier that they don't have to weigh up and might making that decision and pulling that trigger. That might be the thing. Sometimes we talk about the straw that could break the camel's back for being the end of something. Sometimes it only takes one additional straw to be the start of something.
To
You just need to
start.
give a little bit more motivation or one more piece of information, one more reminder, and that can be the thing that allows someone to tick over and start. So, sharing this information in a non-judgmental or coercive way with someone you care about, like, hey, you know how cool this is?
Yep.
50-year-old lifters are actually just as potentially, able to perform and respond to their nutrition as a 20-year-old. Oh, sure.
Even 90 years, we have a study like there is never too late to build the muscle. Even though your testosterone level will go down, but that doesn't mean that you cannot build the muscle. And we are the
Absolutely.
living example that at a contest prep, you are actually hypogonadal, right? At those essential body fat level, but that doesn't mean your muscles falls off at your from your bone. So it's
Last
never
time I
too late.
checked, women could build muscle too, right?
Yeah.
It's not all about testosterone.
Yeah. Definitely really, really good points that you have put forward. So with that segue, let's deep dive into the today's agenda, which is the adherence. So the thing is, whenever we try to pull out or get any kind of a new kind of a skill, or try to learn a new kind of a skill, or someone approaches us to help them with their either with their diet, with their nutrition, or if people are having issues in their relationship, if they are having issues in praying to a god or to the devil based on the cult that they follow, we always slap this sticker on their back that adherence. If you are not getting the results, you are not adherent enough. If you are not getting the results, you may be not doing your part. Just adherence, adherence, adherence. We just start slapping this sticker at everywhere where the bandage is required, and we think that that is the answer for each and everything. And that is true more often than not, that as if you are adhering to even a suboptimal routine, it will let you somewhere, at least it will help you get started. So, and your both of your pyramids, whether it's nutrition pyramids or the training pyramid, their base is, and the foundation of those pyramids are adherence. So before we talk about the nutrition and training protocol and how this adherence plays in that particular thing, I just want to ask you what adherence actually means in a layman term. right, for a general population. Because if I'm getting a client, or any coach is getting a client, or trying to guide even their own parents, how do they define what actually adherence is? Is it different than a decision making? Is it different than a habit building? Is it different than a consistency? So all in this paradigm, what adherence actually means.
Yeah, it's in its very basic form. It's to what degree are you able to follow the plan that you set forth? Um, and I really liked how you mentioned how so often you'll see on the internet or among trainers. I actually think it's an excuse to be like, "Oh, it didn't work because it was
Yeah.
poor adherence," because it absolves you of any responsibility as the trainer. And it's the thing that feels like it's the least in your power. Like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yep.
That's true, but that's not necessarily an excuse just because you are have poor emotional intelligence and your programs lend themselves towards poor adherence, right? This is exactly the error I made for probably the first 3 years as a personal trainer. I was a bodybuilder who really just wanted and loved to see people do bodybuilding. And I was giving people similar programs and nutrition plans to what I thought was best for bodybuilding at the time and what I thought was quote unquote optimal, but actually probably had the opposite effect in terms of the outcomes because they were not meeting people where they were at. And I see building self efficacy as stepping blocks. You know, when you think about someone who comes to a personal trainer, they're saying, I want to pay someone else to help me figure out how to do this thing because thus far, I know it's important, but I don't know how to do it or how to stick with it or etc. Sometimes it comes down to I don't have the belief that I can do it, or maybe I don't have the knowledge and I want to do it right. But many times it is the former. And just simply giving them like really hard training and like if you create an energy deficit and produce progressive overload and you think your job is done, that's you're going to have a really tough time as a trainer, and you're going to find yourself often, like you said, slapping a sticker on all of your failures, which you have ownership of to some degree as an adherence issue, when in reality it's no different than good goal setting. Like we talk about this all the time in fitness settings. Like if you take a total beginner who has never lifted weights before and they go, you know what, the goal is in 1 month, I want you to deadlift 700 pounds. The only thing that's going to happen is they're going to feel inadequate, right? Even Andy Bolton only pulled 600 pounds his first time deadlift. So if you give them this completely unrealistic goal, even if they make substantial progress, and I think we've all experienced this as lifters, we're going to feel like something like it was a poor outcome. Like I remember we had a little bet between us 3DMJ coaches of who could hit a 500-pound squat first. And I remember being disappointed that I hit 495, even though it was like a 20-pound increase in 6 months because I didn't hit 500, And you can think about how that would be in someone who's trying to exercise for the first time and how often our expectations become unrealistic. Like, the biggest loser, you watch that, oh, you lost 7 pounds this week. And you go to a trainer and they tell you that less than half of that is too fast, you know? So ultimately, it comes down to setting someone up for success. It's not just how do I get someone to follow the optimal plan. It's how do I construct plans and how do I communicate them in such a way that will lead to the highest likelihood of adherence? Because everything rests on that. You could follow, like you said, a suboptimal but still fundamentally principled program and nutrition plan 100% of the time, and you would probably get 90% of the results. However, if you were to follow a perfect plan that only some AI in the future could develop, who could look past all the sports science that was done over 1,000 years, and you followed that, say, 60% of the time, you would get 60% of the results, which is less. So it really does come down to consistency. And any world champion or world champion coach or highly successful person in any field, if they're not selling you something, will tell you that consistency is always more important than perfection, which is fundamentally the idea of chasing adherence first rather than theoretical optimality.
Yep, indeed. So, and we have already learned these in the textbook as an SNC coach that first line order of principles are knowing the science behind it, but the second line order of principles are knowing how to execute them as per the setting of an individual. No matter how good your plan is, if that particular individual or an athlete or a general population, whomsoever he or she is, if he just directly says that I just don't enjoy it, so everything on paper which you have designed, quote unquote, optimal or to the best as per the scientific evidence, it's going to fall apart. So with that in mind, what are the few points that you want to give suggestion to the people who are listening to this? What are the foundations of building adherence? Whether it's good and bad, we will discuss it. Because not every adherence will lead to a good outcome. Just because if you are following or adhering to a bad protocol, it will lead out to a bad outcome because that protocol is bad. But you are doing your justice to that protocol. We will discuss this within this session as well. But as a foundation, as a building block of having a good adherence, what are the things that you want to promote or what the listeners to know about?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is actually something I don't even mention in my adherence chapter of the muscle and strength pyramid, because the muscle and strength pyramid, and I think I mentioned this last time we talked. It's written for people who are already lifting weights. Like the novice program is for novice bodybuilders and novice powerlifters. And I can tell you something: if you meet a novice bodybuilder or novice powerlifter, what are they talking about all the time? Powerlifting and bodybuilding, because they are in love with it, right? It's the new thing. They're in the honeymoon phase, right? So this was almost an assumption that didn't even include in that book, but it's more relevant if I'm talking to, say, personal trainers. Is exactly what you said. You teed this up: enjoyment. So one thing that I realized really quickly was that my clients, when I was a personal trainer, we're talking 2010. They would sometimes see me, like they would come in and I would be just finishing a workout between, clients or something like that, or they'd see me sneak in a can of tuna, and they see this and they go, "Man, I really admire your dedication, Eric." And I've always been someone who bodybuilding is really, really exciting. It's part of a grand plan, like constructing something. I love it. I only do it because I love it. And I tried to explain to them, I was like, you look at me and you say I have all this discipline, but just like I didn't want to miss the morning cartoons when I was 10, or I didn't want to miss playing the new video game when I was a teenager, I don't want to miss a workout. This is like telling a teenager who's skipping homework to go play like Call of Duty, like, "Oh, you're so dedicated," you know? But the thing is that some of those teenagers are really good at Call of Duty. You know what I'm saying? Like they have gotten so good at something. And it's not like, in most cases, unless they're like, I want to be a programmer or whatever, that they're sitting there going, "I really need to practice these skills. Like I need to work really hard and have a whole lot of discipline to get good at this video game." It happens naturally because they enjoy it, like you said. So I think a fundamental basis of having a lifelong commitment to exercise or movement or whatever you want to call it is enjoyment. And I think if you're someone who comes from one of these fitness cults, and I'll include bodybuilding, powerlifting, weightlifting in them, if you have a very narrow view of what fitness is supposed to mean, this means that you're probably not going to acknowledge all the various flavors that people can try out there. You're basically a chef who said, "Hey, we just serve hot dogs here. And if you don't like hot dogs, here's the fix: try liking hot dogs, because that's the right food." Someone goes, "But I don't like hot dogs." And they go, "No, no, 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 no. No, the right thing to like is hot dogs." And they go, "I don't want to eat your hot dogs." That's poor adherence. That's basically what someone says when they can only give someone powerlifting style training, or only give someone weightlifting style training, or only give someone bodybuilding style training, when you might find that they crave much more variety. Or let's say they don't like lifting heavy weights, they like to sweat and they like to feel the burn, or vice versa, because you can run into both types of people.
Yep.
um, or you want to have them feel the burn, get a pump, all that stuff, see their body change, and they're actually really fascinated by increasing loads over time and building strength or something like that. So I think being able to expose people to different pathways so that they have a higher likelihood of enjoying it, and having more abilities to program than simply what is potentially optimal on paper, but knowing the ins and outs of what is optimal so you can get many different pathways to get to it in a way that can leverage someone's preferences, it gives them a much higher probability of enjoying something. Because I'll tell you this, most people come into a personal trainer's office or gym and they're expecting to hate it, right? That's why they're hiring you. I mean, if you think about it, like, fitness for most people is, especially if they're out of shape or didn't have a very athletic background in life, like it wasn't associated with sports, they didn't like it, right? Or maybe even worse, they had a poor experience with sport. They got hurt, or they had a really like jacked up coach or whatever, or it was something that they associate with 20 years ago when they were in shape, but now they couldn't possibly do that. And this whole fitness thing it's weird. They used to train for their sport, but now I can't play my sport, so I have no connection to this. So it's difficult. It's the thing that their doctor yells at them they're supposed to do because they weigh too much or their BMI is too high. You know, it's the thing their spouse nags them about, like, oh, you quit smoking, but now you need to start moving more. So it's basically like them coming to your office and saying, hey, I need to see a dentist 3 times a week. That, like, nobody wants that. Not even dentists want to see other dentists 3 times a week, right? So you have to really give them an opportunity to have a perspective shift. That means you want to provide them a great environment, and you want to give them the opportunity to find something that's at least not unenjoyable. And then the next trick is that it actually has to still produce progress, you know? And that's a tough one because what we don't want to do is just remove all components of difficulty so that it is not bad. That's kind of like meeting the client too much because the client, like I said, they come in and they see training as this hard, awful thing that hurts and that I can't stick with and that everyone nags me to do. And if you go, well, you know what? I'm not going to give you a new perspective. I'm just going to remove all the bad things. That would be like going to the dentist and they sit there and go, I'm not going to clean your teeth because it sucks. And you go, sweet. And then they go, yeah, you've got cavities. Anyway, go home, So you're not solving the problem, right? So they still have to get overload. So then the question is, well, all right, how do we find a way to do this in a way that doesn't suck? Well, the good news is that if you do fitness right, you get better. So another part of your job is, okay, we need to produce overload and maybe the least annoying or painful way possible that hopefully adds in elements of things they enjoy. And then make it very obvious to them that they're making progress. Because I tell you what, if we go back to that Call of Duty example, the most frustrated I've been, at times, sometimes playing video games, you want to like slam the controller down. Like,
Yeah.
you can get incredibly frustrated very quickly. But the inverse of that is when you actually overcome that and you see your own progress. We've experienced this anytime we've learned anything, whether it's a motor skill or finally getting an equation in math class or whatever. Once you have a light bulb moment and once you're able to see your progress, that is like a drug. And that's something that
A
social media
dopamine hit. Yeah,
absolutely
dopamine
literally
hit.
is a dopamine hit.
It's
Exactly.
a dopamine hit.
Yep.
You get addicted to the progression.
And that's not a bad thing. If that dopamine is coming from something that is not actually a drug, if it's coming from you
Internal,
you
you're
getting healthier or you getting fitter or you learning things, now we have gotten that feedback mechanism where we've made this something that's far more palatable. We've hopefully started to shift the perspective for the client that exercise doesn't have to be like going to the dentist. And then holy shit, you're right. I have gotten stronger. I never even saw myself as a strong person, but I'm throwing around dumbbells that all of my peers at the same age would probably go ask their son to help them move. So I think that's kind of that feed forward mechanism you want to get. You want to shift the perspective and then create that positive feedback loop. And there is a balance that needs to be struck there. Like another example is, let's say someone really likes variety. You need to you need to be savvy enough to give someone a lot of variety, but also give them the opportunity to do the same thing they did previously so they can see their own fitness
so
gains.
that yeah.
So it's
So
it's
if
not
it's
easy.
almost like if one session I'm giving you squat, other session leg press, other leg extension. So by the time you go back to the squat, they have already forgotten that particular motor pattern, learning movement, how to actually keep their back straight and all the processes in the right thing. So too much of variety definitely gonna hurt you. And all these things which you have explained, literally pure gold, those things completely applicable to the nutrition side as well.
Hmm.
So, do you want to share some insights on how nutrition side adherence works?
Absolutely. Like the here's one thing that all of the various confusing messages in nutrition have in common is they're all crazy, right? So whether you have to eat no animal products ever or you're a bad person, or whether you have to only eat meat or you're part of the medical
Carnivore, yeah,
conspiracy,
vegetarian.
or whether all carbs are the devil and fructose makes you gain instantly pounds of fat, or whether all fat is something you should be afraid of, or whether you have to not eat until after 6 p.m., or whether you're only supposed to eat after 6 p.m. All these contradictory messages, and those are all real diets, folks. The one thing they all have in common is they're extreme. They all ask you to do things that you don't want to do. They all ask you generally to create a caloric deficit that is twice as high as your average nutritionist would recommend for a phase of weight loss. They ask you to completely alter your time schedule or completely alter your food selection so that you're doing things that you would not like to do. The only thing they have is that they produce fast and rapid progress. But why do they always fail? Adherence, right? The saying that is very common is that, especially when we talk about the obesity epidemic, is that people are great at losing weight, but they just lose the same weight over and over and over again. So sustainable weight loss is the issue. And we have data on this. And when you
Yep.
get dietitians involved, when you have follow up, when you have people get access to better information and they're taught skills, they take slower rates of weight loss, then you start to see far better adherence. When they stay active, when they have metrics and things they can track, and they get feedback. If you look at the National Weight Control Registry, all of these things are associated with long-term maintenance of weight loss. So there are some very fatalistic messages out there that pretty much all weight loss efforts fail, and that's unfortunately because so many of the weight loss efforts out there are, like I said, have the one thing in common: they're extreme and they're crazy. So just like if you decided I want to start going to the gym and you immediately started basically having the dentist 3 times a week experience, that's just basically a ticking time bomb of when you're going to stop. No one's going to keep doing that. You're spending money to do something you hate. That doesn't stick. So just like you have to find something that you actually has a feed forward mechanism for training, the same thing is true with nutrition. But again, part of that feed forward mechanism is progress. And ironically, to kind of counter something I said, there is some data to suggest that initial
Yeah,
faster weight
initial peak,
loss in individuals with obesity is actually associated with better
adherence and
long-term
motivation.
weightness.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's because when you have so much weight to lose, seeing that it is possible in a reasonable time frame to lose it is very motivating. Uh, you know, I mean, if people have a variance in their scale weight by 2% on a day-to-day basis, think about if you weigh 300 pounds. That means any given day you could be 306 or 294. So what does it mean for me to lose a pound a week? Like pretty much nothing. But hey, if I'm dropping 2, 3, 4 pounds a week on a regular basis, like I feel like I have some agency. It builds self-efficacy. I have now belief in myself that I can actually achieve this goal. So I'm much more likely to have a why to stick to the process. So essentially, what you need to find is that same balance. You still have to know nutrition enough to be able to, let's say in this example where I'm using of weight loss, which is not the only example. This applies to any nutritional goal, whether it's for health, performance, or say muscle gain. You still have to be able to provide that dopamine hit of progress, but it needs to be something that is informative, they're a part of, is not painful. So if someone is expecting, a 1,500 calorie diet where they can only eat, things they hate, and they can only eat at times when they're not allowed to eat at times when they normally would, and you tell them, hey, we can eat, 500 to 1,000 calories more than that. There are far more food options. We don't have to remove X, Y, and Z. And here are some skills, some things to learn, and you focus on the process. So they get to build new things, and they have different ways to see progress. So if they can, start orienting themselves so that successes are not just defined by what's on the scale, but also by being able to make these changes. How many glasses of water did I have today? Awesome. How many servings of fruit did I have today? How many of my meals was I able to get a serving of protein? These are all little wins that you can help reorient them towards. And they're seeing, reasonable weight loss rates. Maybe it's not as motivating as like 6 pounds a week, but you've given them all these other things to gamify, to get those dopamine hits from, and it's sustainable. So, maybe they would have stuck to that lose 6 pounds a week diet for 4 weeks, but now they look up and they go, wow, it's been 12 weeks of me following this diet, and they lose just as much weight, even though it's at a slower rate, but it actually feels sustainable. They're learning new skills. And then you can use other things that can improve adherence, like a diet break, which we've now got good data on to suggest that can increase satiety, reduce hunger, and tends to result in better weight loss maintenance over time in the one study we have on obese men by Byrne and colleagues. So there's a lot of strategies we can use that might not look quite as optimal or efficient in terms of what's the fastest way to lose body fat, that might result in better long-term loss of body fat. But if you're not aware of them, or if you take a purely punitive approach as a trainer, like the standard Monday self-hate thing, ask your client, so what did you eat over the weekend? Oh, you went and had Chinese. Of course you did. You lazy son of a bitch. Like that standard kind of, oh, how many curries did you have this weekend? Well, you undid all the work from last week. Like you recreate this messaging they already believe, that the only reason they're in the gym is to lose weight because they look terrible now and they have to fix themselves. So if you want to perpetuate the whole Globo Gym kind of mentality, then yeah, you lean right into that. But if instead it's an opportunity for learning, and you teach them skills on how to operate outside of just following some kind of strict meal plan, or some kind of ridiculous diet, and you help them have all these other avenues and pathways for success, it's that feed forward mechanism which builds self-efficacy and ultimately long-term changes.
Perfect, perfect. Really, really good points that you have put out, your gold. So, on the same note, let's continue this. These are the guidelines for the practitioners, like for people or the trainers like us. Now, let's flip the side and see through the eyes of a client or a
Mm.
general population who doesn't know the science behind it, first order principles and the second order principles. They are hiring someone or a coach, so that they get guided by a good one. How they can identify that training or nutrition plan, whether their trainer, their online coach, their offline, their personal trainer, whomsoever who is guiding them, is actually an quote unquote optimal one, right? Because as a uh, general population or as a client, if that particular client has 100% trust on the trainer, that's that's what actually we as a trainer want. But for them, for their public awareness, for their general education, what suggestion, what you want to give them, so that they can identify the facts versus the facts, and they can set it up. Okay, what you are trying to sell me is quote unquote not that much optimal. So what are the things that you have experienced over the time period in this iron game, in this weight restricted game, which has helped you in identifying those facts versus facts, eureka moments, and those understandings or those learnings can help a general population who's trying to hire a nutritionist, a dietitian, or a personal trainer, so that they can identify what is quote unquote good or bad for them, because they are going to adhere anyhow.
Great question. Yeah, the biggest thing is what does the initial consultation feel like when you sit down with a nutritionist or a trainer? Like the easy answer is you want someone with a bachelor's or a master's or higher and certain certifications. And while that can improve the likelihood that you're going to get someone who knows what they're talking about, it's not a for sure thing. But what
Yeah.
I think is close to for sure is the experience of the initial consultation. If you actually feel like you're being sold to, like if they're spending most of the time talking rather than asking you questions, that's a red flag to me. A new like if we talked about from the practitioner's perspective, what results in good adherence, and a lot of it is understanding the person's whys, their preferences, what are their barriers, what's their history. That's a lot of shit I got to learn about my client, right? And
Yeah.
that's from both from the nutrition and training side of it.
Entrance.
What's So how am I going to learn those things if I spend 45 minutes of our 1 hour consultation talking? I'm not. So what you should be getting, like if the only input you give them is like a PAR-Q and ACSM health questionnaire, and the rest is just them showing you exercises and talking about, muscle physiology and trying to sound smart and showing you cool equipment and letting you try stuff. And then they give you a sales pitch at the end. Get out of there. The good one always, by the way, if you want out and you're feeling sold in one of those positions, I need to speak to my spouse. That's a great way, because people don't
That's a
really
great.
know what to do with that. I can tell you from the trainer, when someone says that, you just kind of got to respect that, because then you can pull like, well, we don't make financial decisions like this unless together. Okay, cool. Well, I'll give you a call. So that's the easy out. And just as a little hint to all the people who are trying potential personal training or nutrition coaches, because what you actually want it to be is a series of questions about what's worked for you in the past, what hasn't, what are your goals? And a lot of the times, the what are your goals pathway of questions, it should lead you eventually, maybe not in the first consultation, to realizing that maybe you didn't have that super clear to yourself.
Yeah.
You might go in with just like, I don't like what I see in the mirror. I like, as Dan John would say, that's not me. Like, that's not who I identify with, but I don't know how to change it. You know, and one thing we know from goal setting studies, when we look at like who successfully is able to follow their New Year's resolutions, is they have what's called approach versus avoidance oriented goals. So an approach oriented goal is that you are actually trying to achieve something, or you're moving towards something. Like it doesn't, it could be the same outcome, but a different orientation. For example, I want to incorporate more healthy foods into my diet versus I don't want to eat crap anymore, right? They, on paper, they should result in the same thing if I'm
Same.
speaking from the client perspective. But the latter is actually far less likely to succeed, because it puts you in a poor emotional state. It puts you in a perspective of, I have to remove things from my life. I am a bad person. What I do is wrong, rather than here's an objective goal that I can move towards, hence approach, right? So approach oriented goals actually require you to have an idea of where you want to go, not just being dissatisfied with where you are in your life. And it's okay that you're dissatisfied with where you are in your life. We all experience that, and that can be an initial motivator to change. However, the actual process of change occurs by focusing on where you want to go to. So the trainer should be doing their job of helping you reorient that dissonance you have with your current position in life towards moving towards the action phase. So if we look at the stages of change, um, and you can just, I mean, these are easily Googleable, but they are, fundamental aspects of human behavior. We initially start in a place of not even accepting that there needs to be a change. We don't have a desire to change, so
Yeah.
it's not going
Denial.
to
State
happen.
of denial. Yeah. State of
Exactly.
denial.
Denial, or even just disinterest,
Disinterest.
and then we move into information seeking. That's typically where we might first get a client, um, and eventually we get to that point where we're in the actual action stage, and you can catch a client anywhere in there. The rare client who comes in and, like I mentioned earlier, not the norm, but does happen. I'm definitely going to do this, but I think you know how to do this better than I do, so I'm asking for your help. But hell, if I walked in here and you weren't here and you just sold me a gym membership, I would train right now for an hour. I wouldn't know what I'm doing, but I'm ready to work. That's not the person you're going to get most of the time. It's going to be someone who doesn't know what to do, hasn't fully committed, and maybe they're trying to outsource their motivation.
Yep.
And it's not out of a sense of laziness. This isn't the time to stick the adherence sticker on them and go, oh, you're just trying to buy me for your motivation. Instead, it's time to go, well, maybe they haven't moved on from the information seeking stage to the action stage because they don't really know what they're trying to achieve. They just know they don't want to be where they are. So if you are a client, if you can kind of get under the hood and now know from listening to me that you should be being given basically an individualized plan, they need to be getting a lot of individualized information from you, related to your history, related to your preferences, the barriers that you had in the past, and actually helping you figure out what do you want to approach. And that process shouldn't just happen in the initial consultation, but it should be a large part of it, but it should continue. So if you see that in a trainer, and if you get that sense that they're listening, they're genuinely interested, and they need you to form a plan, which they should, that's a good sign. Because even if they don't have the science perfect, if they're trying to set something up that fits your lifestyle,
Yep.
it's going to be better than some cookie cutter plan. So, like if someone is just going to say, right, you're going to come in 4 times a week and we're going to do an upper lower split, and you're like, I only have 2 days a week to train, and they go, that doesn't work for me, that's probably not going to be good. So that's really what I think you want to experience, and that should also be reflected, like in the modern times, like it's 2021. It's not like you just walk up to a personal training clinic and you're there. Most of them have social media pages
Yep.
or things like that, and you can get a sense, like, are they selling a cookie cutter plan? Do they say that their nutrition principles and training principles work for everyone without mentioning anything about individualization or how to modify it for your life? Is it just everyone does a CrossFit training program and everyone eats paleo? Or is it everyone goes low carb and everyone does HIIT? That's something that's a
Red
bad
flag.
sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Red
absolutely
flag.
something you want to avoid if it doesn't seem to be any mention of individualization.
Yep. Definitely pure gold. And on that same note, I also want to throw my 2 cents. See, if I am a practitioner, 90% of the battle I will win in forming and training a nutrition plan by identifying and learning about my client. How has their medical history been? How successful they have been when they try to lose the weight or any kind of achieving a goal. Because success do leaves clues, and you have to pick up those clues, right? And how their sleep been, how stressed they are in a day-to-day life. Because you cannot expect a newborn mother who is definitely not having a great time and having even 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and then you just slap on a really uh, cookie cutter uh, training or nutrition plan. It's gonna worsen the situation, and especially if someone is having a non conventional type of a job, where they are flying in a different time zones and they are a medical doctor being on a foot 24/7. You yelling at them that you are not getting your diet right, or you're missing few workouts in a week, it's just gonna worsen the situation. On the flip side, for a client, on how to identify a particular coach is having some kind of a sense. Maybe he is not a PhD. You do not, if want a PhD, you can afford, definitely go for it. Someone like Eric, or someone
I
like
would say you probably don't even want someone with a PhD, because that means they spent at least 3 years focusing on a very, very narrow topic
yeah,
and they
yeah, yeah.
probably didn't have time to be a full-time trainer gaining
Yep,
experience.
yep. Because field work somehow gives you much better experience than on the books, right? So as a client, you have to identify the red flags. Instead of he yelling at you or keep on providing you the information, how attentive he is at listening to you, how attentive he or she is in finding those clues of the success which you have been in past, what has worked for you, what are your favorite fruits. Because if he or she is a good trainer, even though no matter how much addicted you are with the chocolate, he can still make a plan and give you 10 grams of chocolate as per the calorie balance. If in a grander picture of things, 95% is good food, and it's the 5% of the food which is letting you stick to that particular plan, especially in the initial stages, it will set you up to the success. And following that, you have talked about the goals and all. What are your thoughts on the SMART goals? Because specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, these SMAR are really good. People get stuck, and if I have seen really, really good trainers and clients get stuck when it comes to the time bounded, right? SMART goals are really good for taking someone from point A to point B, but what's after that? So,
Yeah.
to share some insight on that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of SMART goals.
Oh.
So the here's an interesting thing I found out, and it was actually part of my mass writing. This is actually one of those things that did, like, it blew my mind. So the SMART goal acronym that was co-opted by the fitness industry actually came out of the corporate management world.
Corporate management.
Yeah. And the original acronym, I'm actually going to forget what it was. It's modified slightly for fitness, but it was all based around having an objective, like, sales target that you could achieve and that you thought was realistic and time
Yes.
bound on a regular basis. But it was always for goals that had a specific endpoint. Like, we need to sell $10,000 of whatever my industry is by this quarter. And that's just not how fitness goals work. Like, that is absolutely how you continue the process of losing 30 pounds and regaining it, because it's all extrinsically based. But I think, so parts of the SMART acronym I like, parts of it I don't.
Definitely.
So I think specific, if we're talking about, having
Set of
things
goals,
that are specific to
specificity.
you, like these goals are important to me, and I can figure out what they are. Measurable, yes, but I think that almost beholdens you to, like, oh, I got to lose a pound a week, like that.
Yep.
That's our time frame or something like that. And also, like, actionable and realistic. Like, the reason why those are unclear, and like you hear different versions of SMART goals, is that was the part that was actually changed from the original acronym. I'm going to look it up real quick, because I just need to remember what the original
Okay.
SMART goals were, because they came from, like I said, management.
Corporate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they
It's a
came from.
financial targets and the sales target. Definitely, I can say
Oh
they
yeah,
are
this is
being
it. I remember now. So the A actually stood for assignable.
assignable. Yeah.
So you means you specify who will do it. It's so
Yep.
corporate, right? So specific, measurable,
Hierarchy. Yeah, hierarchy of
assignable.
bureaucracy and the hierarchy
Yep.
aspect.
So I'm the manager. I'm going to give it to this guy, realistic and time related. So it got to fitness, and they went, well, assignable. That doesn't really make any sense. This is for a specific person. Let's make it actionable. And that's kind of like, well, what is actionable? That's sort of realistic, like,
Yep.
you know. So anyway, the SMART goals are, I think they're useful for athletes when they have specific measurable targets or
Yep.
performance metrics. But
Training plan. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is, they tend to get you to focus more on outcomes than processes,
Yes.
which is a problem, because maintenance of behaviors and having more and more of those positive feedback dopamine hits is all about having more things to reward yourself and doing the things that lead to an outcome, rather than just putting the outcome on a pedestal.
Yep.
So in the muscle and strength pyramids, I sort of lied earlier. I said I don't even touch on this. I do, but I didn't start with enjoyment being the foundation. I actually included it in an acronym that I developed there called REF. You want to ref yourself. So this is kind of keeping yourself on track, like you're the referee, and that is realistic, enjoyable, and flexible. And I think those are really useful, because some people really like to set goals like, I want to squat 500 pounds. But I think a far better goal for certain types of mindsets, that it doesn't have a potential risk. Like I said earlier, if the goal is to squat 500 pounds, but let's say you had a magic crystal ball, and you knew if you did everything right and had like a sports physio and like a nutritionist, and you're making maximum gains, that you could only squat 495. Well, that wasn't a realistic goal, but you can't know what's a realistic goal. But we can know
How did
what's.
you start achieving or like the path leading to up to that goal? Like realistic can be anything. You won't be able to identify until or unless you start doing it.
Exactly. So the only thing we know is realistic is that we're going to make progress, right?
Progress.
So I think that the realistic, enjoyable, and flexible mentality of how to set goals, they feed forward into one another. So if something is enjoyable, you're more likely to do it, right? If something is realistic, you're more likely to do it. And if something is flexible,
Flexible.
you're more likely to be able to do it when things challenge you.
Challenge.
And I think these are things that lifters run into a lot, who are otherwise dedicated, like especially in like the evidence-based community, folks who are really really into like what's optimal. Like, you get this all the time, and I'm sure you've had this, Palash, or maybe you've even been someone who's asked this question. I know I have been them in my past, and even sometimes recently. Is you ask a question that you know the answer to, that you want to have your cake and eat it too. Like, hey, so if I want to do 20 sets per week, but I get elbow pain, like, what should I do? Or hey, like, so currently with my job, I can only work out 4 hours per week, but I want to maintain a 6 times per week frequency. How would you set up a program? You know, you can hear it immediately. The premise is already flawed. The person is not willing to accept what they view as a concession to make something more flexible, right? Or like, hey, I'm going on vacation. Should I try to train at least once or twice a week, or I'm worried about losing my gains? It comes from this kind of idea of fear of not being optimal. You know, it's this kind of FOMO, if you will, fear of missing out on gains, FOMOG, right? And so, and it's helping them acknowledge, like, look, you are a human, and it's more important that we are consistent, especially as a novice or someone who's new to the game, so that you don't set yourself up for failure. So, for example, one thing I find myself doing when I have fat loss goals for people is inevitably a vacation will come up, right? And they'll go, hey, I'd like to stick to my weight loss goals during the vacation. And they come to me with the goal of basically, I want to, I'll bring my food scale. I'll make the right choices when we're out. I found a gym. And I first I go, I love how motivated you are. This is awesome. And then I start to talk about, well, hey, why don't we take a look at this, like the concept of a diet break? We've already been dieting for X amount of time. This might be a great opportunity to see if when taken out of your environment, you can just hold steady, you know? So it's a tough message to sell because for them, and they want to keep making progress despite a vacation. But I know what that does is that they're going to set themselves a goal, which is actually not that realistic, a very challenging one, and one that even if they succeed, they're not going to enjoy their vacation. They're probably going to piss off their
Yep.
family, right? So they've set themselves up for a lose-lose scenario. Either I do follow my diet and I piss off my family and I don't actually get a vacation, or I don't follow my diet and I can't enjoy the vacation and I piss off my family because I'm pissing and moaning and depressed because I gained weight and didn't work out as much as I was supposed to. So all of a sudden, the same outcome, quote unquote failure, is now actually the goal. We don't want to lose weight on the diet. The goal is to see if we can just maybe, without tracking, maybe with only working out like once or twice compared to 4 or 5 times while on vacation, or maybe just like one full body session, or hell,
Yep.
just bring some bands to to like your hotel room or whatever. Can we stay on track? And now every other time in this person's life they've gone, I've gained weight on vacations and it was a complete shit show. It was the beginning to the end of my weight loss or my diet or my fitness goals. Now they see they have the tools to weather the storm. And it was the same outcome. We just shifted the goalpost to something that was realistic. We allowed them to have a realistic goal on vacation, enjoy it, and that's because we gave them flexibility. So all of it works together. And you have to find, what's the best way to go in each scenario. I've had a client who went with his family to Disney World in the middle of contest prep, and we just went, look, get in one workout, it's just a maintenance workout, and just have 3 square meals where you have a protein serving, and you load up your plate with vegetables, but besides that, don't worry about it. Don't track. Don't bring a scale for your body weight. Came back, same body weight. And he's like, oh my God, this is awesome. And that's the type of thing that builds self-efficacy. But if we'd gone there and I tried to make him be like, listen, man, we're 12 weeks out, no time to pull punches, it probably would have, at the very least, set him up for emotional distress in terms of the relationship with his family, at the very least.
Definitely. The same kind of experience I had, I want to share my insight. So I was going through a long cut, aiming for around going from 16% to almost like 10% body fat, so that I can set up. After the lockdown, I gained a lot of body fat, and I went to around 12% body fat, and then I met the woman of my dreams as of now, and then I went on a date with her, and on the entire day my entire focus was how can I save my calories, how can I save my calories so that I can save those calories for that end meal when I will be sitting with her person, that particular person. And from the very first meal I didn't eat anything, because we, being a sports scientist, we can skin a cat in the most efficient way, and our mentality has completely shifted from one spectrum to the other one. And I'm sitting on my date thinking, what should I order? Like, how much calories it's going to be? Like, should I order or something, this tequila, or like, should I even indulge myself anything? Not listening to any shit she was telling me, or not indulging into it on the back of my mind. And she, fortunately, is the same person. She also follows the diet. So thankfully, it turned out in a positive manner. But the thing is, dude, my long-term goals are okay. I have a insight over them, but those long-term goals are taking a toll on my short-term life. Live Fitness is a part of my life. It's yes, we being a coach, being a sports scientist, we have made it as a career as well. But there are other aspects of the life as well, right? We have to enjoy our life because life is meant to be enjoyed. Our fitness should potentiate our life. It's not like the other way around. Our life should not be dictated by the fitness, right? And the
Well said.
same things we have seen in those 4 weeks, 12 weeks transformation, right? If you go in a really, really good gym who has hired all those science-based coaches, they can give multiple 12 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks transformation by giving you really good diet, but it's still a science-based crash diet. You are not setting up those clients for success down the line. And if those clients come back to you after 12 weeks, you failed as a coach. You have done everything quote unquote science based, whatever the PubMed might say. This is the best kind of a scenario for a science based weight loss program, but you are not setting up your client for the success. You are not giving them the appropriate education that if you track the calories, this is one aspect. This is one diagnostic tool along with your body weight, along with your body measurements, along with your skin calipers, or you can make some changes. If you do not want to have X food, just replace with some Y food because they are coming to you almost 3 times a week. They are free. Why not set up a weekly newsletter or weekly consultation call or just a morning message so you can empower them all those 12 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, so that once they are no longer being crutched by your particular quote unquote hand holding habits, they can still live the life on their own because festivals, families, anything is going to happen. That's what life is. And if you are putting a restrictions, it's only a matter of time. Those restrictions are gonna fall off and they are gonna fall back to your track. And I think you have mentioned somewhere on with some podcast that you were presenting in Singapore. So do you want to share that insight? I really love that. I have not that much.
Yeah. You basically said it exactly. We had I can't remember if I was in Hong Kong or Singapore when I presented this, but I think it was very popular. There's a specific gym in that part of the world where their entire marketing strategy and business model was based on 12-week transformations. And they would have business persons or others who were like, hey, I'm down to do whatever for 12 weeks. And they were very science based. So they're exactly what you were describing. They created the largest sustainable calorie deficit with, full body style, muscle retention based, training
Training.
sessions 3 times a week, and also with some extra caloric burn. Um, and the thing about science is it only answers the questions that you ask. So
Yep.
if you look at all the studies that last, 8 to 24 weeks on what's the best way to lose the most fat mass without losing lean mass, that's the question you'll get. You won't get the answer to the question of how do I ensure that these clients maintain that fat loss long term. And even if you do everything, and you will have done a science-based program to get them to lose as much weight as possible without doing anything to help on the other side. And I basically, the person came there and said, look, I see this as a problem, but this is the environment I must work in. How do I do this ethically? And how do I actually help make sure that I don't have the same client do 2 or 3 12-week transformations and have the same transformation each
The
time,
same
basically.
transformation again, again, again.
Yeah. And I told them 12 weeks is a lot of time to be in their ear. And the 3 1-hour sessions that you're with them per week is but a fraction of that. And honestly, like, don't just sit there and count their damn reps, and hold them in their stretches and talk about their day. That is every rest period, which we know is most of weight training. And the whole time they're warming up and the whole time they're cooling down. And if they hang around before your next client, if you got a 15-minute break or what have you, in addition, like you said, an email list, and you can create this whole curated thing with a lot of content, should be all about what lessons do you learn and how can you transition to maintenance. And that should be, yeah, sure. You do the corporate overload 12-week, transformation thing that you must do to keep your job. But your entire everything outside of, here's the calorie deficit and here's the training program you're doing should be directed towards giving them all the tools they need to have a higher likelihood of long-term success. And that, yeah, that's exactly what I said, because that's a big thing these days. I mean, that's the most popular marketing strategy that you'll find out there, is these transformations. And unfortunately, they do exactly what they advertise to do. 12 weeks of
Exactly.
progress, and then you go back to the way you were.
They
So,
promised what they delivered what they promised, but because they are time bounded, that smart goals, that time restrictive, they are trying to restrict it to 12 weeks, not for the entire life. And people do it just for their own sake. They want to
mhm.
keep their job and all. Or some trainers have this kind of mentality that if they make their clients so much autonomous, they will lose that client. Anyhow, they have to put the food on their plate. People have their justification. We are not delving into that, but
Oh, I'd be happy to delve into that real quick.
pretty
That's a foolish
low hanging
proposition.
fruit. Yeah, yeah,
I would say it's even a poison tree that you don't realize.
yeah.
So there are gyms everywhere. There are gyms, like if you're in a densely populated area, there's gyms all over the place, and there is, because of that availability, people are going to go to the gyms that are close to them. So
Yep.
they'll look at, like, I'm going to look at a 10-mile radius. I'm going to look at all the ratings, and the one that has the highest rating that actually picks up the phone, that's probably going to be the one they choose, right? So if they go there, let's any gym in a local area, and they find that what they get is actually not great, which they will eventually get if you keep pressuring them into re-signing, despite the fact they're getting minimal gains and they feel like that they need you, that you are their crutch. Eventually, they're going to just quit or not show up or never answer the phone or just disappear. And at that point, they will have so much resentment that they will become a negative referral for that place. I
Yep.
mean, anyone who's ever worked in customer service, you don't get calls of people going, "Hey, you guys are great. Just want to tell you that today. See you later." Hang up.
True.
You
We
get
have
people
to
who
chase those
complain.
clients to get that feedback. We have to chase those clients to get that feedback. But if it's a negative feedback, they will yell at your ear any time of the day.
Absolutely. You catch them in a bad mood and they had a slightly bad experience, someone's going to find out. They're going to write that email. You know what I'm saying? But if you go out there and you empower and you create autonomy in your clients, and they have a ton of success, and their friends ask them, like, "You're a totally different person, inside and out, from who I knew 6 months ago. What did you do?" They're going to say, "Oh, go check out Palash down at the gym he works at," or what have you. And that'll be something that actually generates more referrals. And I remember having this argument multiple times with colleagues back in the day. And the thing was, is I never had trouble getting more clients to walk through the door, even though I was the one who was telling them, "You know what, you don't need to re-sign up. You're good.
Yeah,
Like, you got this. We can go down to 2 times a week. Let's go down to 1 times a week. Let's go down to just you doing an online check-in with me every 3 weeks.
yeah.
Let's say goodbye. Like, you like training now. Like, I see you in the gym when I'm training other people, and you're alone now. What do you need me for?" You know?
I have incorporated all the good habits. I have made you a better you because the somehow the clients and the trainers paradigm how this works. Trainers want to make their clients into their next other half, like another clone of themselves, instead of focusing on making them a better version of themselves.
Themselves,
So this is
100%.
where they flunked up. And for the client's perspective, I want to listeners to hear this green flags. So what are the green flags of a good trainer is your trainer making you competent? Is he or she guiding you through the process? Like if you are going to a deficit, what is the deficit? What is the energy balance? Is this a normal question? I have ask them why this food, why not that food. If they are able to answer those questions, and if they are able to guide through the process, they are making you competent. Second, they subscribing you or you imparting you some kind of relatedness. Okay. If you are doing this, you will be able to become healthy. You will be able to play with your children without facing any kind of a joint pains or minimizing the joint pains, back pains. In a day-to-day life, you will be much more be indulge in a more physical activity if there is any kind of a group activity, which is why group activity is so much is popular, your yoga, Zumba, CrossFit, because they have this community aspect. They can relate. If that particular guy or a girl, if mother of three at this age can do that, why not me? So I can relate to that particular person. The third is competence, the autonomous. If they are not making you autonomous over the time period of any time period in which you make hire them for particular restricted time period, if you are saying that they are enforcing more crutches on you, they are making sure that you uh, stay with them. You need them at each and every aspect of the life, whether it comes of a nutritional guidance or a training guidance. That's a red flag. It should be the opposite way. They should work in making you autonomous. So that's
That's great, Palash. I love that you pulled out self-determination theory. So that's a pretty good model for understanding human motivation.
yep,
And you can see how they all work together too. So like just to reinforce what you said, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, right? So I think autonomy and competence are sometimes ones that are a little murky for people. Competence is having command over what you're trying to do. It gives you a little bit of competence or confidence, and you know what to do in different scenarios, right? Autonomy comes back to what we started with is the motivation and enjoyment factor.
yep,
That you're pursuing your own goals, and like you said, that's where a lot of trainers go wrong is they try to make them clones of themselves. And I think clients sometimes will come to you and ask for that, even though they don't know they shouldn't want that. Like, hey,
yeah,
you're the boss. You tell me what to do, I will do it. Instead of the trainer, and the trainer goes, yep, that sounds great. That's the perfect client. Not really, because you want the client to find something that they're going to stick with, that they love it, that you set them on a path. Like
yeah.
there's the analogy
You give, yeah, yeah.
of a
You give
parent.
them the,
They're,
yeah.
they're,
You give them
they're
the
the bow and
wings.
arrow. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
like once you,
Exactly.
if you aim it well, it's going to go where it's supposed to go, but you don't get to control where the arrow goes after it leaves it. So this is basically like you need to make sure that the client is going in the direction where they want to go. What I always tell athletes is like, I'm never going to be mad at you. Like they, sometimes I have athletes, and this is a very common thing, and it's not even a bad thing necessarily, but they'll be like, I don't want to let you down, coach. And I always tell them, like, you can't let me down, because these are your goals. You know, like if you fall short of them, I just feel bad for you. Like, I know how important they are to you. But that's a key. You got to get there. Like, you have to get the client to the point where they are embracing, like, these are my goals. And here's an example of when you can achieve competence without autonomy, and it doesn't matter. Like, think about a class that you passed at any point of your education that you hated.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about it. Like, yeah, I learned trigonometry, but like, so what?
So
Right?
what?
Sine, cosine, tangent. I like, that's what you want to talk to me right now. No, I want to talk about the game. Like, or I want to talk about something I care about. You know. And how often do people who are interested in something but incompetent still talk about it? That's most of fitness, right? I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I think I know about nutrition, but I've got a whole page dedicated to it. I'll tell you about the alkaline water you need to drink, and I'm excited. I live the lifestyle, but they're completely incompetent. They don't know it, right? So, and why are they on social media? Because it's what they care about, the autonomy, and to create a community, relatedness. So to really be effective and to stay involved, eventually having poor competence will bite you in the butt or bite your clients in the butt. They all need to work intrinsically together. And I think that's a great way to understand it, that it's your job to provide all of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, or to help the person achieve all of those.
Because our 12-week transformation, 8-week transformation, if you are just solely as a client, as a trainer focusing on that, it's a low hanging fruit. You can do much better. Like, you can retain them for maybe 5 years. Maybe your particular general population client can turn into a national level athlete. You never know, because we always started like this. Our goal was not to become a sports scientist. It's just how it things pan out, how events unfolded in front of us. They had down the brakes, and we kept on walking. So it's my job as a client to give wings to my it's my job as a trainer to give wings to my clients and let them fly, but I will always be there to catch them if they free fall. Right? It's almost like an Icarus. On the other hand, if you are a client, how can you make sure that your trainer is getting you all these three aspects: competence, relatedness, and autonomy? Is he guiding you through the process? Is he teaching you how to use macros? Because how to use it, weighing scale, how to use a food weighing scale, body weighing scale, inch tapes. Yes, knowing about these things make you competent, because he or she is not living with you 24/7. Ultimately, you are going to make those choices, and once you go out, if you have done a great deed in developing these kind of habits, you are competent, you are autonomous, and you have a related uh, factor as well. So on the same thing, on the flip side of it, we as a sports center, or like being a weight restricted class, we know that these are the diagnostic tools, but these are not the only diagnostic tools. So if I'm having a gargoyle of tracking the calories each and every day, It's a matter of fact, I will stop doing it, because if I am restricting my client, then you have to track the calories, you have to track the calories. Yeah, it's good in the beginning because they are learning a new process, they are seeing the changes, they are liking it. But if you are restricting them just on that aspect, it's about a matter of time they will stop doing it, and they again go back to their ground zero. On the other hand, you can start educating them to some approach like precision nutrition, that hand uh, portion control. And over the time period, if they are seeing that 50 gram of rice, what it looks like on scale, they have doing it for the 12 weeks, and once they go out, they only know, okay, this much is the rice. If I'm putting it, it's almost close to 50. There might be a margin of error from 40 to 70, and I'm happy to take that. At least they are not indulging themselves into the gluttony, and we have all done that. Once we go out, it's a buffet. You are going to eat it not as per the satiating effect, but for filling your mouth till the end of the reality. So these things. Do you have any kind of a points on putting the gargoyles or these watchers, or like there will always be a leash? Some days it's gonna tighten up, at some days it's gonna loosen up. So do you want to throw some
Yeah.
points on how to put those gargoyles into good use?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the flexibility aspect again. So another expectation I think most people have when they get into fitness or sport, and in sport sometimes you understand it is a necessity,
Necessary.
is that it's going to be hard, right? It occasionally, or for at least a time bound period. But the problem is when we're talking about like lifestyle change, anything that's hard can't be sustained. We actually understand that fundamentally in exercise science. Like if we're going over our anaerobic threshold, we can't sustain that effort. We have to slow down or stop, right? If we are using our 12 rep max, we can't do a 13th rep. That's our 12 rep max. So the same thing is true in behavior. If something that you're doing requires constant effort, it is time bound automatically. So if you are white knuckling it, just barely holding on to follow your diet or follow a training plan, that should be a signal to you going, okay, what I'm currently doing is not sustainable. Now, to some degree, you're also building familiarity with it, but they need to step together. Like it's just like the general adaptation syndrome. If you give yourself so much that you can't actually adapt to it, then you get into what we normally would call quote unquote overtraining. And that's not what I'm talking about here. But the point is you need
Habits,
to
in terms of habits.
exactly, you need to build it in a stepwise fashion. You need to meet the client or yourself where you're at. And if you do need to, for a temporary period, do something unsustainable, then you need to have a game plan as an exit strategy or a downgrading strategy. So, for example, we're going to push really hard and then we're going to do a diet break. But we're not going to push so hard that diet break becomes binge eating,
Binge.
right? Or we're not going to, or I've got a peaking program and then a deload week. We're not going to push so hard so that the deload happens because you're on crutches, right? So it is finding that balance that I think is critically important. And many times being more flexible and having more options can give you those opportunities. If you are unwilling to take a diet break, then that's not an option to you. If you are unwilling to do anything except a 1,500 calorie deficit, instead of say, I was able to sustain. Let's say, for example, we take that same model where we acknowledge that someone with a lot of weight to lose is motivated by losing a lot of weight initially. I normally think it's a great idea, initially at least, to lose as fast as you can while still feeling like it's sustainable. And at the
Sustainable.
first whiff of feeling like this is hard, I don't want to keep doing that, awesome. Let's throw 1,000 calories back in. It's going to feel like a bright, brand new day, but you might still be in a deficit. You know, if you go from being in a 1,500 calorie deficit to a 500 calorie deficit, your life just got way better. You completely can change the foods you eat. You can include way more things you enjoy. You can be less neurotic in your tracking, because the same absolute error that we might get from weighing and tracking for 1,500 calories makes a bigger difference relative to the amount you're eating compared to, say, 2,500 or 3,000. So now all of a sudden, it feels way easier, but you're actually still moving in the same direction. You're still progressing. Instead of what most of the time people do is they don't have that flexibility and they go from eating 1,500 calories until the wheels completely fall off. And then they go to binge eating and hating themselves. So it's this planned break that actually the data would suggest doesn't result in these compensatory backward shifts. When we have planned diet breaks, even when they're not like, I'm going to eat at maintenance and see if I get a metabolic benefit. No, like the first stuff, like Wing and Jeffrey back in, like, geez, almost 20 years ago now, their research showed when they wanted to look at when people break their diet, they instituted a diet break. It didn't result in what they expected of stopping weight loss because it was planned. The
It was
difference
planned.
between breaking your diet because of fatigue and having a planned diet break is autonomy. You have chosen to do this. It is actually part of the plan. It's not failure. It's just part of the process. So, and this is not, the point isn't diet breaks. The point is that if you can have more tools at your disposal, and if you
Yep,
can have more ways, flexibility, to stick to the quote unquote plan, because the plan isn't rigid, then you have more opportunities to feel like you're still succeeding and allow yourself to go back below anaerobic threshold so you can keep on progressing and moving forward.
definitely. Really, really good points. And on the same insights, when someone approaches to me to make some kind of a lifestyle change or some kind of intervention, an intervention can be anything like from the nutritional side or training side, without going directly into the deep, I will give this analogy like how many times do you brush in a day? So they're like once a day is fine. So how about you do twice a day? So not every day will be fine. Okay, let's start at least 3 times a week, twice a day. Okay, so you are willing to do it. Why? Because it will help you with your cavities, with your some kind of good bad breath and all at the end of the day. So if you're willing to do it, let's choose the same things and some kind of put some gargoyles in the terms of your training and nutrition plan. So when someone is saying it, quote unquote, what is the most optimal diet and what is the most optimal program? Training program. So how many days should I lift? So that is not the question. How many days are you able to lift is the more optimal. If you can only go to the gym for twice a week, like I cannot give you a 6 days a week program, quote unquote, which is optimal for you, but that doesn't fits the case, that individualized case for you. So we have to make sure that these things are into the play as well.
Yeah, that's actually just a great way to kind of cap off this conversation, is to provide the concept of especially people who are consuming, let's say, content on what's the best way to do things,
Yeah,
is to always work within the constraints of what's realistic. So, and you'd be surprised how far this can apply. Some people will be like, look, I'm not Jim Pop, like I'm a bodybuilder or whatever. So we interviewed Brian Whitaker on Iron Culture, myself and Omar Isuf. That's our podcast. For those who don't know, Brian Whitaker actually just made a return to the stage and
yeah,
placed
exactly.
fourth.
I heard that news as well for the bodybuilding as well. Right?
Yeah, he just placed fourth in the OCB Yorton Cup, which is like basically a world championship event. Previously, back in 2015, he won the Yorton Cup and WMBF Worlds, the two top at the time pro shows. It's basically being a world champion in two different divisions, right? Two different federations, I guess is the way I should say. So he was the first one to do that in natural bodybuilding, and he is. I would say he's not the most genetically gifted bodybuilder. He's definitely genetically gifted enough to be a world champion. But what he is known for is his extreme conditioning. He's able to get incredibly lean, and even when he faces competitors who have, better shape or symmetry or a little more muscularity, I shouldn't say muscularity, more, muscle shape, popping bellies, better separation. It's just so hard to take your eye off him because he looks like an anatomy chart.
Yeah,
So hard, detailed, grainy. You can see everything, and that's why he's able to compete at that highest level. So right there that takes a lot of dedication, time, and effort. And this is someone who has had to work very hard to be at the top level. He placed second, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row in the WBF Worlds to like Jim Cordova, who used to be just one of the best natural bodybuilders in the game in the 2000s. So he had to work very hard to get to where he is. And even speaking to him, he said, what I do is I optimize things within the constraints of my life.
yeah,
So that means he starts with what's realistic for me before then going, all right, and then how do I do the best I can with it? And for some context, this guy is a PhD in economics. He's a full-time professor, and he also has a family. and he's also a pretty spiritual guy. So for him, he sees uh, academia, family, and his spirituality all coming first. So bodybuilding for him is fourth. Yet he is in part of the sport the best bodybuilder on the planet at his peak. So what do you do with that? Well, you have to kind of admit that maybe me doing the sacrifice everything for my sport thing is not necessary and potentially just harmful.
Yeah.
And it is much better and more individualized if you can go, all right, what's realistic within the confines of my life? Okay, that's going to enhance my enjoyment. That's going to, and then be flexible with that so I can always be consistent within this new paradigm perspective and then optimize that. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter how optimal the things you don't do are. So, anyway, I think if it applies at the highest level, then it definitely trickles down.
Yeah, yeah. So on the same note, like the just like James Clear likes to quote in his Atomic Habit books, if you have identified that problem, you have win almost half of the battle. Now, once you have identified those 9 to 10 problems or the habits that you want to build or you want to capitalize on, do not attack all of them at once. Pick your battle wisely, divide and conquer. Because if you try to attack all those habits, all those crutches, all those, whether it's a good habit or building habit, that's all, it's a reinforcing flow or a balancing flow. If you are trying to tackle all those habits at one time, you are setting yourself as failure. And it goes for both as a practitioner, as a trainer, versus as a client. So it's your trainer's job to identify the goals, 5 to 6 goals, whether it's short term and long term, because those short terms will translate into long terms. And it's your job as a client to accept those goals and tell more about what you actually want from that trainer, and then come on this middle ground and try to start dividing and conquer. Attack them one by one instead of trying to have, I want to do the best possible thing, I want to achieve each and everything, I want to be the next cover model, fitness model. Because it's my job as a client. I live and breathe fitness. You seeing my lifestyle on an Instagram, it's not the thing. The way I condition for a show, it's less than for 24 hours. I do a lot of things for that. You, my job is not to turn yourself into a next me. My job is to turn yourself into a next you. And then once you decide, okay, this is my calling, maybe this is your calling, you want to be a physique athlete or a strength athlete. That's how we all started. More power to you. Like I have succeeded in my goal as a coach, and you have succeeded in your goal as a client. But and that grand picture scheme do not sell for trees for the forest, right? You have to make some kind of a returns on investment. Identify, write it down your goals, try to formulate your habits, and then attack them one by one. You choose your battle instead the other way around. I think that would be uh,
Well
you
said.
want to
I
say.
agree with all of that, my friend.
So that's, I think we should have a we had a really great session. So with that, all those good points which we discussed, how adherence work, how coach versus client paradigm works, how coach can enhance their knowledge skills when it comes to knowing about their client, and client can tell whether that coach is a fad one or the facts one based on the things that we have discussed. So where can people, Eric, find you, Eric, and about your
Well,
work?
just want to say I appreciate this was a fantastic discussion. I think we covered a lot of angles, and if people are interested in hearing more of my chatter and yapping, and well, I'm surprised, but if you really want, you can find me at 3dmusclejourney.com. That is the number 3, the letter D, followed by musclejourney.com. From there, you can find links to pretty much everything we talked about: the muscle and strength pyramids, monthly applications in strength sport, as well as the podcast I'm a part of, Iron Culture, and the 3DMJ podcast. So yeah, just want to say I appreciate your time, Palash. Thank you for having me back on.
Thanks for giving your precious time to me and coming back on the show. We really nailed down some really good aspect. And this episode, especially for an indigenous population in my region at least, can open book of worms for a lot of people so that they can think about there's much more when it comes to that coach and client paradigm. So they might have a bit thoughtful pursuit of their goals, both from the client side and the coach side. So
So glad to hear it.
with that in mind, let's end this podcast on a high note. I hope everyone who has listened to this podcast has learned some good things from this podcast. And if you have, please feel free to share this podcast with other people so that they can also learn some good things from this podcast. As we have discussed, we have touched upon various aspects of how a coach versus client paradigm shift works when it comes to the adherence. As of now, this podcast will be available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, along with the Google Podcast. You can reach out to Dr. Eric Helms on the links provided in the description below, and you can also check out the MAS monthly application instance code through the links which are provided in the description. So, till next time, goodbye.